You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiffany's Take, where I answer your money questions. So if you would like your question answered, go to www.moneytalkwitht.com/ask Tiffany, and I will be more than happy to answer for you. So a lot of people have been reaching out to me about the Supreme Court rulings that has happened over the past week, and it has been a lot. And so I wanted to address some of these concerns, at least as it relates to money. Now, they did a lot of controversial rulings. So to recap really quickly, they killed President Joe Biden's $400 billion plan to cancel or reduce federal student loan debts, which is what I'll talk about today. They ended affirmative action at the higher education level. So meaning, schools can no longer look at race in their decisions in admitting students into their programs, which has consequences as well, but I won't get into that. I might do that for a live or something. So make sure you follow me on social media. And then they issued a major decision that impacts gay rights as well. So a lot of this stuff has happened over the past week. So it's super important for you to dive into what has been ruled, where we're at with the laws, and how that affects your personal situation. But for the purposes of this podcast, I'm going to stick to the student loan debt situation because I've talked about it a lot, when I was doing my Finance Friday lives, and those episodes made it to the podcast, and we were waiting so patiently for that reduction or cancellation of federal student loans. And now we know that that's not going to happen. So now that we know that that's not going to happen, I wanted to hop on the podcast today and talk about what to do next, because I know a lot of people are really, first of all, taken aback because they were waiting on it, but also they're wondering, okay, now what? And so let's address that. So first and foremost, student loan payments are set to resume in October, and interest will start accumulating on September 1st. So it's been 3 years since we have had to pay for student loans, if you have federal student loans. And it's been 3 years since interest had stopped accruing. And so now everything is going back. It's like we hit the pause button and now we're hitting play to pre-COVID. Okay. So with that being said, your situation might be completely different than what you were looking at 3 years ago, because 3 years is a very long time, and especially in the age of COVID. So you may want to reassess your financial situation and see where you're currently at. Are you able to make the same payments that you were making then? Has your job situation changed? Has your financial situation changed? Has your living situation changed? Do you now have kids? Are you now married? Are you divorced? There's so many things that, you should think about to recap to see what has changed in the past 3 years. And once you do that, you can kind of get an idea of where you currently stand. And I feel like that is going to be the number one most important thing to do as we're waiting for this resume to happen. Figure out where you are financially. And so, have you started budgeting? If not, you might want to start if you have to start doing student loan payments. Are there ways that you're currently making money that you weren't making money before? So just think about everything as a whole. Okay. Now, once you take inventory and see how far you've come in 3 years, now it's time to see if that aligns with the current student loan repayment plan that you're on. So yes, it's going to take you either reaching out to your servicer or going to the website again after 3 long years and figuring out what payment plan you are on and if that still aligns. Now, I highly recommend reaching out to the servicer and asking, because when I did this back when I thought that the payments were going to resume earlier, actually June of this year, I had reached out last year and I said, what am I looking at? And they actually told me that I wouldn't have to start making payments immediately after they are set to resume because of the type of payment plan I was on. I still had another few months to get my ducks in a row. And so you want to reach out and just see where you stand in that regard. And if it's not feasible for you budget wise, or if you do not have the same money or things have changed drastically, make sure that you communicate that to your servicer and see what other options they have. Keep in mind that all of the original options that you had for your student loan repayments are still in place. And so if you need to get on a lower payment plan, or you need to use forbearance, or you need to do any of those things, make sure that you're talking to your servicer so that way they can give you all the options that are available to you. Also, you may be eligible to take advantage of forgiveness. There are still student loan forgiveness programs that were in effect pre-COVID that are still going to exist. So make sure that you're exploring all of your options when it comes to your student loans. And the only way to do that is to talk to your servicer. So make sure you do that. Also, you want to think about how student loans play into your overall debt picture, right? So even if payments do resume, how does that look? Like, have you, spent more on credit cards where the interest rates are higher? Did you get a new car? All types of things. See how your student loans play a part in your bigger financial picture and your debt payoff plan. Do they require extra payments right now, or should those extra payments be made elsewhere? So start thinking about those things as we're waiting for this resume to happen in October. And just remember that once interest starts accumulating in September, um, now you're going to have to start paying that interest as well. Now, if you had listened to the podcast or listened to me on social media during COVID, I was really urging people, if they didn't have any other high interest debt, to keep making those payments and were able to keep making those payments because you were able to pay down your loan interest free. So now, starting in September, that interest is going to start accumulating. So one strategy you might want to employ, if you can, is to pay down as much as possible before September. So that way you won't have as much interest that's accumulating, because as we know, interest is based on how much principal you have. And so if you can lower that principal as much as possible before September, then the interest that accrues won't be, as much as it could be. So maybe think about that as we're waiting for this as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that the Biden administration did say Friday that it will provide a 12-month on-ramp period for borrowers re-entering repayment. So what does that mean? That means that you will not be reported to the credit bureaus or be considered in default or referred to collection agencies for late, missed, or partial payments during that period. So keep that in mind as well. If you need to baby step into making those payments, you will not be penalized for the next 12 months. So, like I said, reach out to your servicer, making sure that it's something that's affordable. And then also keep in mind this 12-month period that things will not be reported to the credit bureau. So if you do need to do a partial payment, or, something came up and, because life happens, then you will not be penalized for that as far as reporting to the agencies is concerned. But if that is the case, I still highly recommend contacting your servicer. You will receive bill statements from your loan servicer a few weeks before they restart the payment. So don't think that it's going to be like tomorrow and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, you owe us money. No, they do have to let you know that you do have this payment coming up. So expect to see statements, or if you used to get them email, make sure you're still set up for that. And be on the lookout for those statements so you can see how much you're going to have to pay. Another thing to keep in mind is that If you had automatic debits set up, you will have to go back in and reauthorize those. So it's not going to automatically start charging you again if you did have automatic payments set up. You do have to go in and reset that up and reauthorize them to do that. So don't be scared of that either. They're not just going to start pulling money from you. So, if you didn't get anything else from this episode, the key points to remember are payments resume. Well, the Supreme Court struck down the student loan cancellation, so there's no more of that. Payments restart in October. Interest restarts in September. Pay down as much as you can, if you can, before September to avoid having interest charged on your entire amount. Reach out to your loan, take inventory of where you are with your financial situation, see what you can afford, see what you can do. Then reach out to your loan servicer to see how much your payment's going to be when it restarts with them, or if you need to make any changes to your repayment cadence, you can do so with them. Also, keep in mind that there's a 12-month on-ramp period where they cannot report any negative actions to the credit bureaus. So if there are any late payments or, you're not able to pay or have to make a partial payment, that is not going to count against you. So also keep in mind that bill statements will come. So they're not just going to say, hey, tomorrow you owe us this amount. So be on the lookout in your mail or in your email. And also, they will not just start taking payments from you. Even if you had automatic drafts set up, you have to reset those up. So those are just some things to keep in mind as we head into student loan repayment coming up in October. I am so bummed about not getting the debt relief. And it's unfortunate, but this is also, I will plug, why we need to vote and make sure that we have people working in the best interests of ourselves and our community in those positions. I'm not going to get too political, but I just want to urge people to vote because these people were appointed into these roles by people that you voted for. So keep that in mind as elections come around. There's so many things that I can hit on in this episode, but I wanted to keep it focused on our student loan payments and where we're at with that and what that looks like now. So keep these things in mind. And as you go forth, if you need any help with any of this stuff that I mentioned in the episode, whether it's taking stock of where you are financially, starting to budget, what have you, those are services I do offer on a one-to-one basis. So feel free to go to my website and find out more information. I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes for that. So I would love to help you figure out what this debt payoff is going to look like. So thank you so much for joining me on the Money Talk with Tiff podcast. If you want your question answered on Tiffany's Take, go to moneytalkwitht.com/ask Tiffany, and I'll be happy to do so. But until next week, bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.